I'm Peter Samuelson. I'm the founder of 5 major children's charities, and I have produced 26 motion pictures. And on Dov Baron's show, we are going to talk about the meaning of life. Seriously, not the Monty Python one, but actually, how do you give meaning to your life when money is not enough? And furthermore, how do you use your God-given skills, the ones that you slaved away getting your MBA or whatever, how do you use them to make the world a better place and to make your children proud of you? Maybe that's the meaning of life, is having kids who introduce you and mention the things that you are yourself proud of and do it well. So on Dov Baron's show, I'm Peter Samuelson. The meaning of life, don't miss it.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Cloud, please. And we are good. All righty. Counting us in. 3, 2, 1. Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness so you can reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. Today, we're going to be taking an insider look at Hollywood. Is it a cesspool of degenerates, the voice of the underprivileged, or the spearhead for a new societal responsibility in leadership? You'll find out. Remember, you can now chat with us about this episode or any of our past shows on our new Facebook group inside Facebook there. Just go search out Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. You'll be able to chat with our guest and with other listeners. If you're a new listener, a new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. Remember, you can now find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you tune into your podcasts. And remember, we always need your help in staying relevant. So please get yourself over to iTunes, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. When you do, go back to the Facebook group, Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast, and tell us that you were there. Maybe we'll give you a shout out on the live show. If you can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday, all the way from Georgia to Colorado. And also look for us on Roku TV, where we have over 100,000 subscribers. If you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners, with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every single show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. And by the way, you can also find us on Google Home and Alexa. Just simply say, play Dov Baron Podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everyone you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, someone in the C-suite, a sales leader, entrepreneur, leader in any capacity, you probably know that the call for social responsibility and leadership can no longer be ignored. But how do you actually do it and still be profitable, make a difference, and really show that you care? Well, stay tuned, because our guest today on this episode is Peter Samuelson. Peter Samuelson is a serial pro-social entrepreneur and the president of the Film Association, Inc. 3, a media consulting production company. He is a film and television producer. He has also been production manager, senior corporate executive, and starred in The Return of the Pink Panther. He was a prestigious president of Splash Life, Inc., and the chairman and executive committee of Panavision, Inc. He emigrated from London to Los Angeles and became the producer on The Revenge of the Nerds, Tom and Viv, Wild and Arlington Road, 26 films. The guy went to Cambridge University as well as Wharton School of Business and a bunch of other things you would hardly believe. Like I said, he produced 26 films, including a couple that have been nominated for Academy Awards, and he is the founder of 5 children's charities and has raised over $1 billion in doing so. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome Mr. Peter Samuelson. And the crowd goes wild, young man.
Thank you.
Welcome, sir.
Happy to be here.
Glad to have you on. Thank you so much for joining us. Very excited to get into this conversation. But you know where I got to start is, I know you were producing all these films and you were behind the scenes, but your bio says you starred in the Pink Panther. Tell us about that.
Well, the bio says I appeared in the Pink Panther. What happened was I was the production manager. Part of it we shot in Stade in Switzerland. The director, Blake Edwards, said to me, "Where is my actor to play the clothing thief?" And I said, "I'm very, very sorry, but they had fog at Luton Airport, London, and he actually isn't here. Can you please cast someone from the crew?" And Blake said, "That really pisses me off. You have to do it. That's your punishment." And so it was, very unwillingly, that I actually have a scene opposite Peter Sellers in The Return of the Pink Panther. I did not star in it. I was a bit player. Furthermore, I never paid myself, so I think it doesn't count.
You never paid yourself. Oh, how tragic. And you know, I got to tell you that as a kid, Peter Sellers was one of my all-time favorites. I mean, the guy was a comedic genius. A lot of the shit he did in those days you couldn't get away with today in a politically correct environment, including The Party, which was one of my favorite films. But he was a comedic genius, and to be on set with the guy must have been amazing. But to be playing, beside him, that must have been a pretty cool experience.
Well, he was a very generous and kind and also whip smart genius of comedy and of acting. He was also, in many ways, a very eccentric man. Part of my job was to go around the set before Peter arrived each morning, and if I saw anyone wearing the color green, I would have to say, "Harry, you know you can't have green when Peter's working. Can you go to wardrobe and change your socks? Because otherwise we're going to have a problem here." So I was responsible for there being no green among the clothing on the set before Peter Sellers came out of his trailer.
What the hell was that about, do you know?
I think he just didn't like green. I also think sometimes people in front of the camera, once in a while, have been known to have a little ego, and it's a fragile ego, and they test to see what can I actually get away with before someone calls me out. We were in Marrakesh, same film, and I'm sitting in the office in the Mamounia Hotel, and Peter comes in and says, "Hello. As you know, I am going 2 days ahead to Stade in Switzerland on the private jet, but I have this small suitcase. Would you mind terribly taking it for me so that I don't have to take it?" I said, "Of course, just stick it on the credenza over there." So he now goes off to Switzerland, and I've got 2 days, and I'm looking at this little sort of portmanteau thing, and I go and check, and sure, it's locked. And I'm thinking, I know what he's done to me. We're flying non-stop on a charter from Morocco, home of marijuana and hashish, to Switzerland, where they have zero tolerance, and you go to prison for the rest of your natural life. He's given it to me, so I'll go to prison. We're bound to be searched. So I looked at it for another 24 hours, and I thought it's locked, and I couldn't work out how to get into it. And just before the, vans came to take us to Marrakesh Airport, I said, "Screw it." And I took a knife, and I cut the buckle thing off of it, and I opened it, and it was entirely full of dirty socks.
Oh, my God.
And when I got to Switzerland and gave it to him sheepishly, he was very amused by the fact, A, that I didn't trust him, and B, that I had to deal with his smelly socks. So there you go. That's the whole of my Peter Sellers stories.
Oh, that's pretty funny though. Smuggling his dirty socks into Switzerland.
Yes.
That's a great chapter for a book. How I smuggled Peter Sellers' stinky socks into Switzerland.
There you go.
Go to jail.
There you go.
That's fabulous. Now, you've obviously, like I said, you've done these movies. Some of the movies have been nominated for Academy Awards. We mentioned some of them are very famous movies. But I feel like, in our conversations that we've had before we recorded, that in many ways, your participation or your part in the Hollywood machine is almost a leverage point for you to do the work that you do. It's a springboard for you to have the access to do the things that you do. Tell us a little bit about how being in the position you're in the Hollywood world has leveraged you to do the things you do, and how that works.
Well, obviously, the first thing is money. If you make 25, 26 films, you earn money, and with money, you can exert leverage on situations that you think need fixing in society.
Right.
Money talks and BS walks, maybe. Not always, but
not
sometimes.
Always.
But it goes
sometimes it asks you to smuggle your socks.
Yeah, Peter Sellers' socks. There you go. The glory of being a film producer. I think it goes far beyond that. I think the eye-opening experience for me is that it's got to be 15 years ago. Jeff Skoll, founder of eBay, a very wealthy man, decided that what he really wanted to do was to bring narratives for social change to the motion picture and television industry, both drama and documentaries. And I got a phone call out of the blue. I'd never met him. And he said something like, everyone says you are one of the very small number of people who've got 1 foot in philanthropy and 1 foot in serious media. Come and have lunch. We had lunch. And he said, will you please go on the board of this new company I'm forming? It's called Participant Media. And I said, well, who else is on the board, Jeff? And he said, well, there's Peter Schlessel, who was then the president of Sony. And I said, and who else? He said, well, no, that's it. It'd be the three of us. And I said, it doesn't feel like very many people, but so it was. For 5 years, I was a third of the board. And then Pat Mitchell came on and I became a quarter of the board. And then after 7 years, frankly, Jeff probably never needed us in the first place, but he certainly didn't need us after 7 years, so I went off. But what I saw there was what double bottom line filmmaking looks like. In other words, you don't only make a film to make money, but you're a sort of media B corporation. And of course, that's now become a thing.
Absolutely.
I think 15 states, you can even register with the Secretary of State as a B corporation. What it means in media is you have a double agenda. For sustainability, you would actually like to be commercial. You would like to attract an audience. You'd like it to entertain them. You'd like them to, buy tickets, and you'd like to be able to pay your investors back and give them a profit so they'll invest in your next film, and so on and so forth. But you also have a second agenda. So just to give you one example, if I may, 3 years ago, I taught a class in screenwriting at the University of California in Riverside. So I'm, drawing away and showing clips, and I'm focusing on media for social change. At the end of the class, one of the students, a mature student called Jay Daratani, amazing man, comes up to me and he says, we should have a coffee. So we go and have a coffee. And he says, look, I'm a leading trial lawyer, a litigator. I work for corporations and other people in Chicago. I've done extraordinarily well, but what I do for love is I represent foster kids. And he said that because I had talked a bit about foster kids, which is one of my passions, is to get them into college so that you pivot their lives towards, happiness and safety and not being homeless and all the rest of it. he said, so I litigate on behalf of hard done by foster kids. And I said, well, that's wonderful, Jay. Why do you do that? And he said, well, I just sort of stumbled into it. There was this judge that made me do it. But he told me this extraordinary story of how he had been forced to work with a young man who he had represented, got him exonerated, got him acquitted on a criminal charge where he'd never done it in the first place. But then he discovered that the young man, then maybe 20, between the ages of 12 and 15, he had been repeatedly raped as a foster kid in a placement where, get this, the for-profit foster care agency. I said, what do you mean, the for-profit foster care agency? And he said, well, you know, in about half the states, the government gives contracts to run foster care. It's a bit like the prisons. They give contracts to run foster care to for-profit companies, and then they have reverse incentives. The employees, the executives earn more money the more kids they cram in, the more they move them around and so on. And it's really dreadful. So he tells me this story that he had a great court victory on behalf of the young man. I said, Jay, you're getting a master's in fine arts in screenwriting here. You should write this. Sounds like a story to me. Mm-hmm. I then forgot all about it. A few months later, a PDF arrives in my inbox, and it's the script. Now, normally, anyone who's a civilian that ever sends you a script, it's a terrible moment. You think, well, there goes my Sunday afternoon. Oh, God, they're always awful. You know, I read this thing. I actually read it twice, back to back, overnight. And I thought, this is a remarkably well-written script. It's extraordinary. Wow. Furthermore, I sort of feel as though I'm called to help get the damn thing made, because if we could make it, it would really give a big kick in the derriere of the for-profit foster care industry, which in my humble opinion, shouldn't be allowed. Go make a buck. Yeah, I'm a big capitalist. I believe in, you know, capitalistic democracy, but could you go make $1 somewhere other than on the heads of little children, you know, who can't defend themselves? How about the remarkable concept that we maybe should act in the children's best interests individually? Anyway, so he had raised, it turned out, a bunch of money. I raised a bit more. And we then cast it. We got an amazing director called Yusuf Dallara, who had 5 prior films, some successful stuff in Sundance and so forth. Really good sort of Hispanic Middle Eastern director of very high quality. And then we started casting, and a remarkable thing happened, which is that everyone that we explained why we were making the film, they all said, you know, my normal fee is X, but maybe you don't have to pay me that on this. So and then we extended that, and I wrote a letter to all the heads of department, you know, cinematographer, art director, and so on.
Right.
They all reduced their fees, which meant that, I mean, even the Teamsters cut us a break, which is
really,
if you were in Hollywood, you would know that
exactly.
You know, pigs can fly when that happens. So everybody was kind of kind, not because they loved us, but because they loved the film.
They believed in the project. Yeah.
Yeah. So Matthew Modine, Amy Brenneman, Lou Gossett Jr., Evan Handler, an extraordinary cast came together, and it really was like lightning in a bottle. And then I realized I can draw in nonprofits that work in foster care to work with us in getting it right. First thing, let's get the script right. You know, let's make sure that the experts. So we sat with the students of the First Star Academy, the teenagers at Loyola University in Chicago, and they gave us script notes. A funny little sideline to that is they said, you know, you kind of got one important thing wrong. You've called the young African-American lead, he's called Jamie. You know, we don't have any young men of color who are called Jamie. So we said, oh, all right, what do you think he should be called? And they said, well, what if his name was Jamal? We said, okay, you get to choose his name. He just became Jamal. So 20 weeks later, I'm sitting on the set. We're having lunch, and we're on a ranch in sort of suburban Los Angeles. And I'm sitting with the ranch manager, who has a big Stetson hat. It's all a very American moment. And he said, yeah, we have some neighbors from your business. And I said, oh, really? Who you got? He said, well, we got that African-American chap on the other side of the road with a big hacienda over there, Jamie Foxx. And I thought, oh, well, there you go. Didn't need to change the name. Never mind. But it's a wonderful thing. We've given a credit on the end of the film. I had to work out a way to thank the foster kids, and there are about 50 of them who helped us and advised us, came on the set and did career training and gave us notes, helped train the young actor who plays the foster kid and so forth. I didn't want to say, thank you to the foster kids. So I said, thank you to our expert foster care consultants. We salute your bravery. So when you see the film,
fabulous.
On the end, and it's 3 abreast, and it's first name and initial of second name, and it just goes endlessly up. And I think it's a high point. So the purpose of the film is pay back the investors, make a buck, pay the mortgage, but equally as importantly, and for example, it's half the website that'll launch later this year, is lobby your member of Congress. How can we have for-profit foster care? We need to pass legislation. Have you ever thought of becoming a foster parent? Click here and we'll take you into who will help you to do that. Have you ever thought of adopting? Click on this button. You want more information? Click here. Here are all our affiliated charities. So I kind of think it's a winning game. For the biggest reason is because we live in awful times. Whatever your political persuasion, these are terrible times. I mean, all of a sudden, things are dreadful for many people, left, right, and center. What are we going to do? Who are you going to call? Ghostbusters? I don't think so. I think we're all obligated. You mentioned corporate social responsibility earlier. How I think that applies in media is, sure, make films that just make a bunch of money. Go do something socially productive with the money. But there's another thing you can do, which is to use the same toolkit, make a film that lifts up the world. I want the rest of my career, films 27 and onwards, I want to be focused completely on what I would call B Corp films or double bottom line films. I don't need to make purely money-making films. I want to do both. And I think that actually you reduce the cost of your product, as I said, because people say, I care about this, you need to pay me less than would otherwise be the case. So, I mean, I think our negative cost is maybe 25, 30% less than it would have been arm's length had we been a studio. But then again, when the film goes into release, we're going to work closely with the nonprofits. They've got 4.5 million email addresses in their arsenal. And we're going to say to them, why don't you do a screening in Cincinnati, in Cleveland, wherever, and why don't you invite all your members, or some of them, and why don't you stand up at the end of the film and say, if your heart is moved by this, help us in the following ways. Next Friday, when the film opens commercially, could you take 3 friends and go and see it? Could you put it on your social media? Could you help us trumpet this because it's really good for our nonprofit? I think that will inure to the benefit of the people who believed in the film in the first place.
So is this film is not released yet?
No, next year. We're entered in a bunch of film festivals. Don't know where we're going yet, but hopefully early next year, 2019.
And do we have a name?
Yeah, it's called Foster Boy. Foster Boy. Foster space boy. Foster Boy.
Simple.
It even has a song. So
very cool.
And the website is www.fosterboy.com. And I don't know when your show will be podcast, but we'll be going live in the next, I would say, 4 weeks. We're sitting here, it's late in October 2008.
Well, it will be your release and our release, we will make sure corresponds.
Well, that's fantastic.
We'll make sure that happens. So, but So, like I said, this is something you're doing right now, but you've leveraged Hollywood. You've leveraged your position in power in that world to do a lot of good things. You've started charities. As I said, you've been involved with 5 separate charities. That's been going on even longer than this movie you just talked about. That's been going on for a long time. How did that start? When it's easy to get, I think it's very easy for people to imagine getting washed away in the starry-eyed version of Hollywood. I mean, people seem to, because of a tribal mentality that we live in, people love or hate Hollywood. Oh, I love Hollywood and it's so wonderful. And that's bullshit, because nothing is as glamorous as it seems to be. And other people are like, I hate Hollywood. They're a bunch of sycophantic, it's a cesspool, and how do they have any right to talk about treating people or treating women well when they treated women awfully? And that's true, but it's not the truth, right? So how, you've managed somehow to do this dance for a long time of being in Hollywood, involved in highly successful movies with very famous individuals around you, and at the same time, still make a social impact with the charities that you've been involved with.
Well, it is one of the things I love doing the most is, I should think once a month, somebody who is very powerful in Hollywood phones me up and says, it's time we have breakfast. So we sit in Nate Now's on Beverly Drive in Beverly Hills, and they always say almost the same thing. They say, I'm making $3.5 million a year. As you well know, I'm a full partner now at an agency with 3 letters in its name, or at a studio, whatever it is. And then they pause and they say, my life is shit. I've lost my compass. And I look at you, they say very kindly, and I think you're having a hell of a wonderful time. But I notice a whole lot of it is not for your benefit, but it seems to benefit you anyway, just by making you happy. And I say, well, then, boy, we have a lot to talk about, because don't give up your day job, but think of what you can do if you bring that toolkit and try and make the world a better place. You don't have to do it in one of my charities. Start your own charity. You're an entrepreneur, and so forth. So for me, I stumbled into this. In the early 1980s, I had been in America, I suppose, 6-7 years. I grew up in London. The most important person other than my parents in my life ever, my whole life, and only a close second to my wife, was a man who was my English teacher in 10th grade in London. And he said, see me after school. And I thought, uh-oh, this is not good, is it?
that doesn't usually work out too well.
No, it doesn't. And he said, now look here. He said, if you work twice as hard, you can go to a really good university. And I said, Mr. Lund, I don't think I can. Seriously, no one in my entire family has ever been to a university or a college. And actually, my dad left school at 14. And he said, oh, well, then that's even better, isn't it, Samuelson? Because you'll be the first one. And he was right, and he helped me, and I worked like crazy, and I got myself a full ride to Cambridge, and I came out and discovered, back then, late 1970s, to my disgust, to my horror, there was no ready market for total experts with a master's in medieval English literature. They were not lining up around the block to hire them. And the fact that I could speak Middle English and even a bit of ancient Norse was of no use whatsoever to anyone who was willing to pay me money. But what I had done during college is to work as an interpreter for American, mostly film and television companies. When they would go to Morocco or France or wherever, they'd hire me because I was bilingual. And I was only bilingual because I was good at French in school. And I'd sort of BS'd my way into, oh, yeah, I can absolutely discuss the technology of media in French. Quick, let me look in this book. So one of them said, you should come back to Los Angeles, come back to LA, see how we edit a film. You've helped us make it. Come and edit it with us. Why not? So I went, and I never consciously emigrated. It just sort of happened. And I became a production manager, which is what I had been in the UK. I became a production manager in Los Angeles. I couldn't get into the bloody union, the guild. Could not get in. It was a time where you had to be in it to get work, but to get work, you had to be in it.
Yeah.
It was very well designed, and I couldn't get in. So I promoted myself and said, right, I'm a producer. I won't work for producers. I'll be a producer. So I started producing films. And the charitable side, my cousin, who was still in London, who was 19, visited a children's hospital in London and somehow befriended this little 10 or 11-year-old little boy called Sean. And she made the huge mistake, we both thought at the time, of asking him, Sean, what would make you really happy? And Sean said, oh, that's an easy one. I want to go to Disneyland. So the doctor, Sean's oncologist, said, this child is going to die, but if you think you can get him to Los Angeles, you should do it. Go talk to the mother. The mother, Brenda, said, oh, that would be lovely. So we flew him over to Los Angeles. They stayed in my apartment. It was back in my single days. We did everything you're not supposed to do with a dying child. We had a hell of a wonderful time. He had a wonderful time. His mum had a wonderful time. And we realized that she would remember her son while, you know, having a wonderful time.
While he was in his joy,
while he was in
his pain, yeah.
Yeah, so it was very much in our hearts. And they went back to London and Sean died, which was sort of very sad.
Of course.
And I had a pitch lunch with a commissioning editor from HBO. I still know him. His name's Stephen Yulaki, another very pivotal man, not that he knew it at the time in my life. Steve Yulaki turned down whatever I was trying to sell to him. And he said, well, we're only on the salad, so what else is new and exciting in your life? And we're sitting there in our suits and ties. And I told him the story of Sean. And Steve Yulaki, middle-aged man in a suit, cried. He wept. Now, we're stupid as men. We were then and we still are. We don't know what you do with a crying man. Do you hug him? Do you shake his hand? Do you put your arm around his shoulders? It was awkward and embarrassing, and the waiter was embarrassed, and the people on the next table, and I didn't know what to do. And eventually we said goodbye. He went off to recover in the men's room, and I went down in the elevator, and I distinctly remember thinking, my goodness, I just told someone a story for no more than 90 seconds, and I got an emotional empathy effect. I should call a meeting. So I called a meeting. I was helping run a company at the time called Interscope, Ted Field's company. I was his partner, and I just invited a dozen people. I thought, what do you need to start a charity? Well, it's like casting, isn't it? You better have an accountant, you better have a lawyer, maybe a publicist. We probably need someone who understands the politics of hospitals, because that's where we'll get the sick kids. And I just stood up there at the end of the table and I said, this is what we just did. Maybe we could do it again. And we decided we would form a charity. And the lawyer said, what do you want to call it? Now, for the accountant, I'd had one date with a wildly attractive young woman who I remembered was an accountant. And I had asked her to come to the meeting because I said, I think I might need an accountant. Sorry, I didn't call you, but here I am. And can you come to this charity meeting? When the lawyer said, what do you want to call this new thing? The accountant lady said, you know that children's rhyme, starlight, star bright, first star I see tonight, I wish I may, I wish I might, have this wish I wish tonight? She said, why don't we call it the Starlight Children's Foundation? And we all said, yeah, why not? That sounds really good. So I won't tell you any of the last 34 and a half years of Starlight, but I will tell you that over that period, we have raised and spent over $1 billion on sick kids and their families, mums and dads and siblings. We have energetic and brilliant programmatic spread in just in the United States, 800 hospitals. We're in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, the United Kingdom, Israel. We've served over 80 million seriously ill children and their families.
Wow.
And that's my sort of grown-up charity. I'm going in 2 weeks. I'll be at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and I am presenting to their virtual reality conference. I'm the nonprofit bit. We have worked in a partnership. It's an extraordinary Starlight partnership with Lenovo, Google, George Lucas, Star Wars, Disney, and Niagara Water. It's a huge 7-figure aggregate CSR donation. And we have invented a hypoallergenic, sterilizable headset for virtual reality, where we can say to a kid in any of our 800 hospitals, what would make you happy? You want to see the pyramids? How about a camel next to the pyramids? Would you like to climb a mountain? How about throwing out the first pitch at the ball game? Would you like to go to a rock concert and go backstage with the band? Would you like this? Would you like that? And what we've done is to, and a lot of it has to do with Star Wars. You should have seen our presentation in San Francisco. We had more stormtroopers and Darth Vaders and God knows what walking around in costume. It was absolutely amazing. So we've taken Starlight a long way. We've always done wish granting. Now we're doing it with virtual reality, but it's much, much more than that. There are about a dozen programs, you know, Starlight Fun Centers, and we do group activities and parties and anything that will serve a kid psychosocially. So that's my grown-up charity. It's run so brilliantly by Chris Helfrich, who we pilfered away from the United Nations to be the chief executive. I'm so delighted and honored not to be the chief executive anymore. And I'm just on the board, and I sort of applaud every month. So that was the first one.
What wakes you up? What gets you going in the morning on a particularly shitty morning? Because we all have shitty mornings. We all have the day where it's like, oh, God, you know, something's happened the night before or whatever it is, and you wake up and you just don't feel much like doing stuff. What is it that gets you up and gets you going, Peter?
Well, the first thing is the most productive way of doing lateral leaps of strategic planning and solving tactical challenges is in the 30 minutes of half awake and half asleep, just as you're falling asleep and just as you're waking up.
The hypnagogic state.
Yeah, there you go. You're sort of an expert in it, actually. But I can tell you that for me, what it means is that whatever challenges I have, I do take them to bed with me, but I don't try and crack them there. I just fall asleep with them just sort of gently going around in my mind. It is uncanny how I wake up with a hypothesis towards a solution, sometimes 2 or 3. So I actually leap out of bed. I have to go and write them down is the first thing. There's a fantastic story in my family. My late grandfather, who was a producer of silent films, he wasn't very good at the talkies and actually went bust when talkies came in 1928. But in his heyday, in the teens and 20s of the last century, he woke up one night and realized he had dreamt the most amazing plot for a film. And he said, oh, well, I'll remember that in the morning. He woke up in the morning and he knew he had had the dream, but he couldn't remember the plot. The next night, he woke up in the middle of the night with the amazing plot in his head, and he thought, right, quick, before I forget, I must write it down. No paper and pencil. He went in his bathroom and took the soap and wrote all the key words all over the mirror, went back to sleep. When he woke up in the morning, there was nothing on the mirror because he'd dreamed the entire thing.
Oh my goodness! Even the dream. So
yeah,
even taking notes was the dream. Yeah. Oh my God.
Well, him as G.B. Samuelson aside, I do believe that the reason you jump out of bed is because you've cracked something while you were half awake, half asleep. The other thing that gets me out of bed is young people. I actually think it's not just a platitude. Young people are the future. I teach a great deal now. I lecture in universities, occasionally a high school, and I'm confronted by so many people with pro-social concepts, ideas, and I say to them, honestly, ideas are a dime a dozen. The idea you just told me is a fantastic idea, but the trick is you actually have to do it. How do you do it? Well, there are ways that you do it. It's kind of like, oh, I have an idea for a film. Now what do I do? Well, you need a script, you need a director, you need a whole lot of money, you need distribution, you need a cast, you need to crew it, you need to bring in all your colleagues, you need to keep everybody focused on the goal. Those are the same things you have to do with a pro-social idea. The tragedy of most but not all of our business schools is that they spend a whole lot of time teaching their MBA students and other students how to make a company happen, how to make a whole lot of money. Some bright spark said, we'll give tax deductibility to charities when people donate to them, but our C corporations and our LLCs will be a whole other thing. Actually, there ought to be a hybrid, and maybe, depending on who the next inhabitant of the White House is, maybe we'll even get there on an IRS federal level. There ought to be some of the advantages of a C Corp and some of the advantages of making the world a better place. And they do it on a state-by-state basis in, I think it's like 15 states now. They're called public benefit corporations, B corporations. Tom Steyer and his wife just announced the very first bank that is going to be run as a public benefit corporation, which is pretty extraordinary.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course it should be, because look at what you can do with all that capital if you're not only there to make profit, but in addition to making profit, you're supposed to serve your constituent communities, your staff community, your customers community, your cities, and sort of lift up everybody with your rising tide. So I think the time has come for that, which is a very convoluted way of saying young people get me out of bed, because I think I have something to offer in teaching how you action an idea. I say to the foster kids, because I teach them too, I say, think of it this way. It's dark, you're sitting in an envelope, and you've got a pencil. You could either sit there for your whole life, and you'll never know where the edges of the envelope are, or you can poke away, and if you poke away, sometimes you'll poke through, and you'll say, whoops, I just reached the edge of my ability in that direction. I'll pull back, and I'll just go in a different direction. But it's much better, isn't it, than sitting in the dark in the middle of the envelope without knowing what you could have been. The glory of First Star, which is my third nonprofit, Starlight, Starbright, First Star. First Star, we take 14-year-old year 9 or 9th grade foster kids, and we house, educate, and encourage them and teach them life skills and give them role models on the campuses of great big universities. We have 12 across the United States. We're about to have one in Toronto, and we have a thriving pilot in the United Kingdom at St. Mary's University. We only work with amazing universities. Turns out, if you have a foster kid, let's define a foster kid. A foster kid is a child who, through absolutely no fault of theirs, has been abused or neglected to an extent that the state, the city, the county, whoever the government person is, has investigated and said, no, you're not living with these dreadful people anymore. We're taking you away to put you somewhere safe. Unfortunately, in most, but not all cases, where they put those 437,000 kids in the United States is actually not very good.
No.
It may keep them safe, and in some cases, as in the story of my film, it doesn't keep them safe, especially if it's a for-profit organization, which is very bad, mostly, reverse incentives. You know, how many kids can you cram into this place? Let's move them all around more, because we get a $3,000 bonus whenever we make a new placement. The fact that we took this child out of another placement in order to put them in a new placement, neither here nor there. Send us more money. So what we do is we recruit them into a First Star Academy at one of these big universities, University of Connecticut, University of California at Los Angeles, UCLA, University of Miami, Loyola, University of Central Florida, University of Utah, etc., etc. I apologize to all the directors and committees of the ones I didn't just name. But that's enough. We have 12 and then one in the UK. It's like watching flowers grow. There's nothing the matter with the kids. What you're doing is you're hiring and paying undergrad and grad students who were once upon a time in foster care, and you're using them to live with the kids and be the role models, like the big brother, big sister. And the adults, I used to think I'm like a dad figure. No, I'm not a dad figure. Geneva, one of our students at UCLA, we had interviews done with the kids and we weren't in the room. She says, yes, I love Peter Samuelson. I love him. He's like the grandpa I never had. I see him walking towards me. He's like a little old penguin. And I thought, damn, I'm a little old penguin. Whatever works, you know?
Whatever works.
It gives me a whole lot of joy. So, you know, first star, what does it take to start an academy? It takes a relationship, which can be done by introduction, to one of the top 5 people in a university of substance. It has to be residential. I have never succeeded yet with an Ivy. They always explain to me why they really don't care, and it's not why they exist. I'm sure we'll crack an Ivy in the end, but public universities and faith-based universities, we do extraordinarily well. No one in a university turns out to be even modestly entrepreneurial, think outside the box, except those top 5 people: chancellor, vice chancellor, president, provost, or a dean. Below that, the losing game is, I pitch whoever the person is, Assistant Professor Smith, and they say, this is the best thing I've ever heard. Count on me. I'm going to sell it upstairs. And then 6 weeks later, they phone and they say, I don't know what has gone wrong. I couldn't sell it upstairs. And unfortunately,
how to do that.
Yeah, the art of the pitch, something that you teach, the art of the pitch, which of course you learn by trial and error as a film producer. Think of what a mad career it is being a film producer. You have to go meet people and say, hello, you don't know me, but could you please give me $28 million to make a film that doesn't exist yet? I can show you some paper. It's got the dialogue written on and a few stage directions. And we don't actually have the cast yet, but don't worry, we'll get a good cast. And I sort of have a director if I have the money. Can we do this together? You know?
Exactly.
How do you do that? You have to create empathy. You have to put a picture in their mind.
You've talked about several things here that I want to come back to, which is, you know, you're selling an idea, right? So that's number one. On top of that, you talked about these people that you meet for lunch who are feeling pretty empty, excuse me, who are feeling pretty empty. And then you also talked about environment. And those are 3 things I want to just touch back in on. Many years ago, when I first started out, I did my original training as a counselor, and I particularly put myself out on the street to work with street kids. And we did some great work with my mentor at the time, and we got these kids off the street and did leadership training with them, and they were phenomenal, because living on the street, they had to actually be quite wise and wily, you know. But what we discovered was, as soon as you put them back into the environment, they were just better criminals. They were better at what they're doing. And this is part of the problem, is the environment. And that's one of the things I like about what you're doing, is you're putting these kids in an environment where they are surrounded by others who they have rapport with, who have empathy for them, who understand their situation, but can guide them. That's number one for me, is so powerful and important. The next thing is, in many ways, I think pitching a movie and pitching to a foster kid who has got a very limited idea, because they've probably been through some shit about how the world is, and I've got some very strong frameworks about what that means, to sell them on the idea that you can be successful, you can be powerful, you can be impactful in the world, you can be a good person, and not everybody is that piece of shit who's been doing those things to you. I mean, that's the, you know, you actually have to do a phenomenal pitch, because people don't understand that. People go, you know, well, they're foster kids, they'll want a better. No. Psychologically, normal is whatever you got used to. And if you got used to being beaten every day, that's what's normal. And that's how you think the world is going to work. So you always look through those lenses. For somebody coming along and saying, no, it can be different. It's like, yeah, you're full of shit. So you're still pitching. I mean, I just love this, because I can so see the parallel. And then on top of that is this other piece, and I deal with this a lot, as you know, is that the people I work with privately are very often people who are enormously successful. They are, like you said, they're making $3 million a year or whatever it is. And they're saying, I bought my wife a new set of tits. I bought myself a Rolls Royce. I've got myself a Rolex, and I'm a miserable bastard. How come I'm so miserable? Because they've not found purpose in their lives, and they work with me to find out what's underneath, what's deeper than success, what's more important than success. And what is that? That is certainly success, significance, fulfillment, legacy through purpose, so that you can make a bigger difference.
You got it. The biggest of those words is legacy. And once you get to be like 40, 45, 50, 55, you start increasingly. You've now made enough money that you're not going to be in the poorhouse. You're not going to be living in one of my four-wheeled homeless shelters called an EDAR. You've done all that. You start thinking about legacy. A little sideline that I have is I do consulting to ultra high net worth families. They wheel me in, and it's uncanny how often they have the following problem. You think, how can they have any problem? This family's worth $4 billion. Everything must be, wonderful, isn't it? You never stay in a Holiday Inn. You only ever stay, you take a whole floor at the Ritz-Carlton, that kind of thing. Wrong. So they have this thing that's called the G3 challenge. It's nothing to do with jet planes. The G3 challenge is, the first generation was grandma and grandpa. They started with one haberdashery store, and they built it into a chain across the Midwest, and then they sold it for $500 million. That was the beginning of the family's fortune. G2, the second generation, is their children. They've all got, one's got an MBA, the other's got a JD, one's got an MD. They are all, or another's got a CPA. They all have a work ethic. Why? Well, because they learned from their mum and dad by working in the shops and all the rest of it. Then we come to the G3 thing, which is the grandchildren. The grandchildren have substance abuse issues. They have relationship problems. They can be lazy. They are, quote unquote, good kids who have gone wrong and who have lost their moral compass. So what does Samuelson say? Samuelson says, you have a foundation? Yeah, we have a foundation. Who runs it? Oh, we hired all these people to run it. Don't get rid of them. Get rid of half of them, and have all your grandchildren go on the board and give them actual job responsibilities to find, research, procure, visit, kick the tires of the kind of things that you can help with. And you watch what happens. They'll go, well, I'll give you an example. Not the present mayor of Los Angeles, Eric Garcetti, but 2 mayors ago, Reardon, he and I, we double dared each other to sleep rough on St. Julian Street among homeless people on a Saturday night. It's one of the scariest things I've ever done. It was him and me in EDARS, and the largest bodyguard that I was able to hire, whose job was to make sure we didn't get killed. It's an eye-opener, and no one could do that. And indeed, Mayor Ridden, who had said to me, we don't have a homelessness challenge. They're the only ones who won't go to the shelters we've opened are mentally ill. And I said, you are completely wrong, Mayor. And he said, I'm not completely wrong. And I said, I dare you to come and sleep with me on St. Julian Street on a Saturday night. He said, you have to do it with me. And I said, I will do it with you. So he then wrote a very large check as a recognition that he was, in fact, completely wrong. And homelessness is real, and they're not all mentally ill. And furthermore, 15% are under the age of 18. But back to the plot here, when I meet with high net worth families, or I lecture at things like the Family Office Network or Gen Spring or the Cavendish conferences, I talk about the Medici. I say, who can tell me who the Medici were? Well, 500 years ago, they were textile merchants in Italy, and they made themselves unbelievably wealthy. But what's written on their
bankers to the Pope?
Yeah, what they made their name doing, and nobody remembers their textiles or even the thing with the Pope. What people remember is they invented the Renaissance. Honest to God, they are responsible for the rebirth of knowledge and creativity and art and science and thinking in Europe, therefore in the whole world.
They were the birth of the intelligentsia.
Well, they were the patrons.
Exactly.
Here it is in a nutshell. They had a young man who was the math tutor for their teenage children. And he was sitting waiting to go in and teach algebra to the children. And he was in the great hall of one of the Medici castles. And he looked up at the ceiling and he looked at the chandelier hanging down. And he realized that it made a right angle with the surface of the floor. And he also realized that every Medici castle that he'd ever been in, even though they were hundreds and hundreds of kilometers away, the chandelier always points straight down to the floor. So he thought, you know what? The earth cannot be flat, because if it was flat, the ones further away from whatever's pulling these chandeliers would be at an angle. So his name was Galileo. He said, the world is round. The world is round. And by the way, the sun does not go around the earth. The earth goes around the sun. It's called gravity. The Catholic Church wanted to kill him. They were going to burn him at the stake. What did the Medici do? They said, no, you're not going to kill him. We're your bankers. Shut up. We will keep him safe for the rest of his life. And he went on to do all sorts of great discoveries in physics and so forth.
But you just brought back in a beautiful loop to where we started, which is money can be this great leverage point. You know, and I've said this many times, and I believe it with all my heart, that Oprah said it best. Money doesn't make people bad. Money is a magnifying glass. Whatever you are, it makes it bigger. And if you're a good person and you want to leverage that money to make a difference, you can use that money to make a difference. You know, in the context of family business, I also do work with family business, a lot of it. And we know, you know, the shirt sleeve, short sleeve, shirt sleeve, right? You know, in 2 generations, by the 2nd generation, 40% of those businesses fail. And it's much higher by the 3rd generation. And a lot of it is because that they have lost touch with purpose. They've lost touch with the legacy, the reason why we are doing this. You know, one of the things we teach in our work is that people go into start a business and a leadership because they want to make life better for the people they love. But when you've got enough money, you have to look at a bigger community. And if you don't do that, you very quickly downward spiral back into the old place of not having anything, because it doesn't matter anymore. I don't care. I got people out of this shitty little terraced house, and now everybody's living in a nice mansion. But so what? And that return to purpose is so vitally important. Finding a legacy that matters to you. And it doesn't matter if it doesn't matter to me. It matters that it matters to you, and that you're making that bigger difference is so vital. You know, Peter, we are almost out of time, and there's a couple of things I just want to ask you sort of to bring this home. Number one, as a leader, particularly as conscious leaders, we are, in my experience anyway, we're all committed to growth. As successful as you are, as well known and established as you are, what is one thing that you're still working on within yourself?
I'm putting together with partners a company that is both a for-profit and a non-profit in unison to make media for social change. In other words, double bottom line, commercial media, both drama and documentaries, that is intended to pay back its investors, make them a profit, make us some money, and also meaningfully to have a well-developed social action campaign and make the world a better place. I believe I now know how to do that, and I want to make 100 of those films and television series and so forth. If anybody out there that's watching or listening to this wants in on that, you know, subscription is only by prospectus and etc. and all those weasel words that one has to say.
We definitely want to know about that, and I'm going to ask you where people can go to find out about that in a moment. But I want to come back to what I asked you, which is, what is one thing you are still working on within yourself, which is different?
Well, yeah, it is. I've always got more ideas than I have time to execute. I work relentlessly on delegating and being hyper-organized. I am certain I could be better at all of those things. But I have to say, I have such wonderful colleagues that I actually often don't have to execute. I have to dream up the strategy and the tactics. And then I have other people who sort of zealously implement them, and I'm privileged with who works with and for me in all of my strange number of activity. So I mean, one action point, Dov, would be if you want in on Media for Social Change, just email me. I'm easy to find. The website is www.samuelson, SAMUELSON.LA, like Los Angeles, samuelson.la. Any email on that will come to me. So email me and we'll talk. Secondly, I'm always interested in relationships with the presidents and chancellors and vice chancellors of big universities where we don't yet have a first-star academy for foster kids, looked after kids, Crown wards in Canada, foster kids in Australia. And if you're a hospital or you run a hospital that doesn't have our virtual reality goggles for your sick kids, you can come at me with that as well. I try and help young people to activate their ideas and to turn them into viable, self-sustaining programs. And I also, you know, consult and try and help people to make the world a better place. It needs to be made a better place because there's too many bits of it that are shitty. What are we going to do about it between us?
Absolutely. So tell me, what is your bravest opinion? What, you know, in a world where we are often terrified to offend people, what is your bravest opinion?
My bravest opinion is that we have a entirely polarized country, right and left. I am a lonely little centrist. I believe in the middle. I've chaired thousands of meetings. You always find consensus in the middle. And when you get to 51% from the middle, then you have a vote, and then everybody salutes the flag and you implement. I do believe that the pendulum has swung to bombastic extremism bilaterally, and I think it needs to stop, and I do believe it is going to stop, and how that is going to happen is our young people. The degree of empathy, of humanity, of compassion that young people that I teach, and mostly I sit and listen to them, honestly, because I think sometimes they're wiser than me in a lot of this stuff. I'm an enabler, but there is no shortage of empathy in our young people. They will find the middle, and they will make the world a better place, and they will rebuild our democracy to be the face of America and to remake the American dream, which we've seemed to have abrogated or something. But it's actually a world-winning, extraordinary boost to the GNP and boost to the social welfare of any country. We're the ones who invented it. We should damn well use it.
And as a final question, as a fun question, what is Peter Samuelson's guilty pleasure?
Bicycling.
That's a guilty pleasure?
Yeah. I bicycle every Saturday and Sunday. I do 15 miles on each day. My bicycle, which is it's as elderly almost as I am, my bicycle has 13,685 miles on its odometer. And I talk to my dad, who's 93, on my Bluetooth headset all the way from where we live next to UCLA all the way to the beach and some of the way back. He now knows my route, as well as I do. He says, "You must be going past the Federal Building, are you?" "Yes, Dad, I am." That is, I don't know, there's a guilty pleasure, but it's when I do my thinking. It's when I talk to my dad, and it's, you know, me time. Another guilty pleasure is chocolate. Anyone wants to lobby me, 85% cacao chocolate. Just bring it on. FedEx, gratefully received.
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing that with us. Listen, Peter, it's been a pleasure and honor having you on with us. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Again, please tell our listeners, our viewers, where they can find out more about you and all these fabulous resources, and again, how they can get in touch with you to be of service and potentially find out how they can work with you to make these huge differences.
www.Samuelson, SAMUELSON.LA. So www.samuelson.la. LA.
LA.
And you can email me there, and you know, I'll do my very best to reply. I'm not so good at LinkedIn. I'd rather it came through that website, please.
Fantastic. Well, again, thank you, sir. It's been a pleasure and honor. I hope you'll stay with us to the end.
I will.
And for you, dear listener, you know, as always, and I encourage you, don't just listen, take action. Information's worth the hole in the donut. Application creates transformation. So get out there, make a difference, use your leverage, use your power to make that difference. And remember, you can chat about this show or any of our shows, past shows, on our Facebook group by going to the Dov Baron Leadership and Loyalty Podcast group inside of Facebook. And remember, the research consistently shows that some of the biggest challenges facing the most successful companies can be somewhat counterintuitive, in that these fast-growing companies often reach a point where they realize they're spending a fortune attracting, training, and developing talent, only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're sick of investing in training and developing your talent, only to have them leave you before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide you the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside your organization by tapping into purpose. fullmontyleadership.com, providing you with the concrete soft skills to get you and your organization to the top and keep you there. Why? Because you can't outsource authenticity. Also remember to stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need a triple W, just matrix, like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership matrix self-assessment tool. It's valued at $197. You get it absolutely free by being tuned into our show and find out about your strengths in leadership. And you, as I said, you can also find us on Google Play and Alexa by simply saying "Play Dov Baron Podcast." Thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can leverage your power, your influence, to create a legacy that makes a greater difference. I'm Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach the next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.